Welcome to episode 13, where you are going to learn how to play the game. This is when we will start using the National Mahjong League card, which I hope you've already ordered from the nationalmahjongleague.org. If you haven't, you can watch the previous videos using your timeless card and go ahead and order your National Mahjong 2024 card now. I also want to mention that there are a lot of bogus cards being sold out there. So only order from the nationalmahjongleague.org or a local store that might carry them in your area, or even from a reputable teacher. So now let's head over to ilovemaj.com, where I will be playing through the first 1/3 of the game. Here we are at ilovemaj.com's Game Launchpad. I Love Maj is a gaming web platform where you can play against bots, create a room with your friends, or even use their exercise room to where you can strengthen what you've learned, as well as learning the card, one of the most important pieces to becoming a better player. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time during this episode explaining how to use the site, but at the end of this series, there will be an episode that teaches you how to play against the bots and an episode on how to use the exercise room. During this episode, as mentioned earlier, we will be playing through the first 1/3 of the game, otherwise known as the begin game. And I want to explain to you the rule of thirds as it applies to Mahjong. Take a look at this photo. You're going to see that everyone's wall is already built and East has already rolled the dice to break the wall. And why do we know this? Because the break is here. After the deal, these tiles will have already been dealt out, and after the deal, we are left with 99 tiles to play the game. So depending on the size of the break, we have to imagine where the first 33 tiles are, or the begin game is. In the photo you see here, I've drawn lines where the approximate first 33 tiles are. Now remember, there are two tiers, so if you count by twos and get to 32 tiles using your imagination and just doing this visually, you'll come to 32 tiles, and that's close enough. And that will let you know where the approximate first 1/3 of the game ends. During the next two episodes, we will be playing through the second third and then the final third of the game. The reason it is wise for me to teach this and for you to learn this rule of thirds is because as you get to become a better player, you will be able to follow certain strategies that apply during these three phases. Don't worry too much about this now, because as I am playing each third, I will mention some of the important points to remember as you play. Okay, we're going to get ready to launch the game and start playing through the first third of the game. And you should have your 2024 National Mahjong League card out in front of you. And as we go through making certain decisions and forming our categories, I will have the card panels up on the screen as well. But remember, you learned on the timeless card. Everything that you learned using that card will apply to any year that you play this game. So regardless of whether it's 2024 that you're watching this, 2025, or any future year and beyond the 2039 timeless year, you will be able to apply everything you learned and play and read the card just as if you learned on it. I'm going to go ahead and launch the game. And I am going to go ahead and start the game. And I'm going to go over a couple of differences playing online here as opposed to all of the game mechanics you learned in person. And if there's anything that pops up during this game, I will go ahead and let you know as well.
First Charleston.
So right now the tiles have been dealt for us. The computer niftily does that for us. And you don't see any walls built on the screen, but once the game starts after the Charleston, it will let us know how many tiles right down here, how many tiles are left. So you'll be able to pretty much gauge whether you are in the first third, the middle third, or the last third, based on how many tiles are left. All right, so let's go ahead and sort our tiles as I taught you by suit. And I also want to introduce you to our bots, Agatha Deadhund, Joe Curlis, and Wes Twind. Now, these bots, oh, they're so adorable, aren't they? Their names are play on words, so have a little fun trying to figure out what their names mean. I'm not going to tell you because I want you to figure it out yourself. Have a little fun with it. And if you really get stuck, shoot me an email at debbie@mahjcon.com and I'll let you know what they mean. But I think you'll be able to figure them out eventually. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, I do want to explain how we go about figuring out what we're going to keep and what we're going to get rid of. And simply put, we're working at a high level to begin with. And what I mean by that is we're going to choose categories that the tiles fit into, potentially some hands if the categories are small, and we're just going to collect those tiles throughout the Charleston. So we're going to get started with working with our multiples. All right, so let's go ahead. I did sort by suit, and I'm going to move my east and west like I always do. My east and west and dragons I put to the right. And I'm going to then work off any multiples that I have. So I do have a pair of 3s, and I currently have a pair of 8s. And 3s and 8s don't go together very happily on this card and probably most cards that you are going to be looking at. So we're going to have to work each one of these pairs separately to work off of. And we do want to work off of any multiples that you have, because those multiples are a strength in your hand. Remember that the multiples are a strength in your hand to begin with. So if we start out with the 3s, we do know that 2024 category, the year hand category at the top left, does not work out with 3s, and either does the next category, 2, 4, 6, 8. And if we go down to any like numbers, I'm going to look to see if I have any other 3s, and we do. So right away, I already know that any like numbers would work out with that. And because any like numbers is a really small category, it's only 3 hands under it, it's easy to be able to look at those and say, well, let me keep everything that goes in those categories in that category, the any like numbers, which would be dragons. I don't have any, but also the bottom one has the news, the single grouping NEWS, and I have 2 of them. So I may hold on to those for a little bit to see if I get the N and the W. Why not? It would be nice to try and play all 3 of those hands if possible, if I'm going to go for like numbers. Now, what else could go with the 3s? Well, quince is pretty much out of the picture because I have no jokers at all, and you need a lot of jokers to play quince. But it could be something with a consecutive number, so I might want to keep the 2. and maybe the 5, because of the fact that 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as in line 1 of consecutive run, which uses those numbers only, or it could be any other line with 3 or 4 consecutive numbers. So I might keep all of that for right now. And so right now I'm looking at all of this up until the south. And now I'm thinking, okay, the 8s. What would I do with the 8s? Okay, well, actually, let me back up just a little bit as far as the 3s and the 5s. The 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 category could possibly also be a potential. So I'm sorry I jumped ahead there. But you have the 5 BAM, and remember that category breaks up pretty much into low end 1, 3, 5 and high end 5, 7, 9 odds. So I would keep the 5 if I can. All right, and then the other one is Winds and Dragons, not strong for that, other than the fact that these are in the any-like numbers that I'm keeping. And 3, 6, 9 is definitely a potential to keep, because I have 3s, and now 1, 9. But if I were to keep the 9, I would end up having to pass a pair. And during the Charleston, number 1 beginner strategy for you is do not pass pairs. Now, you could get stuck with a pair that you have to pass. And this situation can occur. I don't want to get into too much depth on this. So if you end up getting stuck with a pair that you absolutely have to pass, you just go ahead and pass it. But I'll just let you know that if, for instance, somebody passes you a pair on the second left and you don't have an opportunity on the next pass, which is the must across, to break it up by doing a blind pass, and you have beautiful tiles going all toward one hand, and there's nothing else that you can pass but the pair, well, you have to go ahead and do it at that point. This is not going to happen often, but I just want you to know that if it does, go ahead and do it. The rule of thumb is don't pass pairs unless you absolutely get stuck having to do it. Do not pass pairs. Do not pass flowers. Pairs would be a gift if somebody is using something in 2, 4, 6, 8, or any like numbers with 8s, or any run that surrounds an 8. It would be a gift to them, but there's so many other hands this year that it could go in with the mini run in Winds and Dragons, line number 3, the quince with line number 2. So there's a lot of amazing things that can be done if you give somebody the gift of a pair. So no, no, no. The other thing is no flowers during the Charleston. There's so many hands that require flowers, either a pair of them or a Kong of them or even a quint of them. So whatever you're playing, or whatever your opponent is playing, I should say, if you give them a flower, you've given them a gift, because they've gotten one more or one part of their pair. Or do not pass flowers. Pairs would be a gift if somebody is using something in 2, 4, 6, 8, or any like numbers with 8s, or any run that surrounds an 8. It would be a gift to them, but there's so many other hands this year that it could go in with the mini run in Winds and Dragons, line number 3, the quince with line number 2. So there's a lot of things that can be done if you give somebody the gift of a pair. So no, no, no. The other thing is no flowers during the Charleston. There's so many hands that require flowers, either a pair of them or a Kong of them, or even a quint of them. So whatever you're playing, or whatever your opponent is playing, I should say, if you give them a flower, you've given them a gift because they've gotten one more, or one part of their pair, or you completing the pair for them. And no matter what, it's a gift. Remember, you can't call during the game to expose single grouping, single tiles, or a pair of something unless that tile gives you your Mahjong. I'll give you reminders along the way so you don't forget these important rules. So that's the basic, those are two basic strategies right now. So because I've got so much going on here right now, I think I'm just going to not add the 369 in, and that way it gives me the ability here to pass the 8 dot, the 8 crack and the 9 crack, and break up that pair right now. And we are on the first right, as you can see right here. And you could double click or drag the tiles to the box. Either way works. Let's go ahead and pass. All right, now I got in a south. Of course, I want a north and a west for NEWS right now for what I'm keeping track of. And I did get in a 4 crack. The 4 crack would work out if I were wanting to keep it for consecutive run numbers, but I have enough right now going on here. If I had gotten maybe a 1 dot and a 4 dot in, or one or the other, I might look more carefully at, like I said, line number 1 of consecutive run, which has to be those numbers only in one suit. But since I don't, I'm going to just go ahead and pass those out. Now I got in a 2 bam, a 1 bam, and a 1 crack. And if I am thinking, like I said, we were keeping 1 3 3 5, well, I've now got a 1 bam and a 1 crack. Now I have quite a bit of 1 3 3 5s going on here, and I do have to make a decision and pass something out. Now, if I want to hang on just a little bit more to see if I get an N or a W, the 2 is probably what I'm going to go ahead and get rid of right now. So I have lots of 1 3 3 5s in the 1 3 5 7 9 category. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this out. And I got another 5 dot in, and I got another 5 bam in. So now I have a whole lot of 1 3 5s, as you can see. And I'm getting ready to talk about the singles and pairs category, which I was hoping would come about during this particular game, which it's great because it has right now. So we're going to talk about that. Nonetheless, it says here, do we want to continue the Charleston? And I have already given you an episode on when and why to stop the Charleston. So we know the answer here is continue, because what don't we have? One complete, almost complete hand. One hand that is so fully formed, and I don't have 3 tiles to pass. Well, I do have 3 to pass, but I don't want to pass all 3 wins, because if somebody is playing in the wins, that's going to be pretty risky. But I need to kind of break it down now, and we're going to do that right now. All right, so I did get a West in. So if I wanted to do any like numbers, line number 3, go ahead and find line number 3, which uses 2 Kongs of like numbers, and in this case it would be the 3s. Only 2 suits, but I would want to keep it to leave my options open. What if I get more 3 cracks than 3 bams, and vice versa, right? I would still need the single N. It's a potential. I could get it. I could pick it in. Maybe it'll still come to me in the second Charleston. But nonetheless, this is pretty nice, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about is the singles and pairs. Singles and pairs are, as you know, the hardest section on the card to make because you cannot use jokers, you cannot call, they're all concealed, and you would have to make the hand on your own until you're ready for Mahjong, and then you could call the very last tile that's discarded. Otherwise, you have to pick in every single tile from the wall to complete this hand on your own. All right, so that leads me to look at this and say, you know what? I don't have any jokers. Maybe I ought to keep track of the singles and pairs because we can always change out if you start getting jokers in or your tiles are discarded before you're ready to Maj and your chances of making the hand are diminishing. So if we want to keep track of it and switch out into something else, every other category on the card is, or I should say, every singles and pairs line on the card are baby bits of the bigger categories. For instance, line 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, in 2 suits, a pair of 2s, a single 4, a single 6, a pair of 8s, and then it repeats in a second suit. They're all baby bits of the 2, 4, 6, 8 category. What we have going on here is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 with the 1s, 3s, and 5s, and that singles and pairs line 2 has 1, 3, 5, 3 pairs, and then 5, 7, 9, 3 pairs. We haven't collected the 7 or 9s at this point. I don't think we even had any 7 or 9s yet. So if I wanted to keep track of that, I would want to keep the 3s, all the 3s and all the 5s. So I'm already keeping the 3s, and now if I wanted to keep the 5s, I wouldn't have the 3 tiles to pass. And the rule is 1 hand that's formed, not a potential. So either I keep track of the singles and pairs and like numbers with something other than line 3, or I go for the singles and pairs. Well, for the purpose of teaching this, because we're going to have more teaching moments in another hand that's exposed rather than concealed, I'm going to say we're not going to follow the singles and pairs line 2, but I want to encourage you to try them out because, again, you can always switch out to another category very easily. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to say continue.
Second Charleston.
And I definitely like the possibility of any like numbers, line 3 or any other category there. And then I'm going to look at the 1, 3, 3, 5 category. And one of the things that I want you to remember when you're looking at hands within a category is something that has 2 suits with 2 pungs and 2 kongs, such as line 2, and let's look at line 2A on the left side, is easier to make than hands that have pairs, if you don't have them already, or single tiles. Okay, so let's look at a hand with pairs. Pairs would be line 1, line 4, single tiles in line 5. Okay, more pairs in line 6, and of course the bottom line 7, which is a concealed hand. So I'm going to look to see if I have any of that, and I do. Line 2, 2 suits, 1, 3, 3, 5. Okay, and that leaves that right there, 1, 3, 3, 5, which is very nice. But guess what? If I want to keep the 3 for like numbers, now I'm stuck again with having to pass the 5s here. So that's a little bit of a challenge, very big challenge. So now what I could do is if I work this out, imagining that I have 1 dots, or I'm going to get them, or I'm going to get jokers, and do it in 1-3 for the first 2 pungs, and then 3-5 for the second suit and the kongs, then I can break up my 5s. Or even better yet, if I decide I want to do like numbers with 5s, then I can take the 3s, and originally what I was going to do, 1-3, 3-5, 1-3, 3-5, but now I'm left with only 2 to pass. So this is stuff that once you're playing and you come in here and practice, you're going to be able to rearrange things and see what's going to work and what's going to make sense, right? Well, I'm going to tell you what, I'd love to try that news hand at the bottom, but because I have to worry about that single tile, and because I have so many wonderful opportunities here with all of these like numbers in 3s, any other line except for the bottom, like numbers with 5s, the 1-3-5 low end category, I'm going to break one of these up. And I'm going to go ahead and break up the east right now. And I'm going to pass that. Let's see what happens. I got a south. I already had a south. That wasn't the tile that I originally wanted anyway. And now I did get a 9. If I were going to be doing the singles and pairs line too, I'd want to keep that. But like I said, I'm not going to do that hand because I think there'll be more teaching opportunities in an exposed hand rather than the singles and pairs. All right, so I got another 5. And now I am going to pass the 2. And I am on the last right here, the second right of the Charleston. And I can do, it says right here, 0 to 3 tiles. So remember we talked about the blind pass on the first left and the last right. Well, I get to now do a blind pass so that I don't have to end up passing 2 wins together if I don't want. And it is smart to try not to do that. So either I'm going to do 1 wind or do 2 to maximize my potential of what I get in. I think I'm going to go ahead and just do the 2 because there was an east. Actually, no, there wasn't an east out there, but there are a lot of winds that have been going around. So I'm going to do just 2 right now to see what I get in.
Courtesy pass.
And I got a 4 and an 8 in, and none of those really work. So now I can do 3. I won't do the south because there was another south out there. I got it in and out a few times. So now we're on the optional across. It's also referred to as the courtesy pass, but the league I think mostly uses the word optional across. I'm going to do 3 because I want to maximize the potential of what I can get in. And I'm going to mention another strategy for you to take away as a beginner. If one of the other opponents, in this case the bots, had stopped the Charleston, and you could do that, remember when you could do that? After the first 3 passes. We want to heed the warning on the first pass, especially when you're playing in person. On the computer, you could take all the time you want. But if somebody stops the Charleston and it happens to be the opponent sitting across from you, which in this case is Joe, you would want to say, no, thank you. Because that means that that opponent has a pretty good thing going on, and you don't want to take a chance of giving that opponent any more tiles to their hand. Now, if in the same situation, like right now we're in, if Joe had said he only wanted 1 tile, and of course the lower number of tiles is the one that prevails, as you learned, I would also say no thank you in an in-person game. But when you're on the computer, it doesn't matter if you want to go ahead and pass. But in person, you would just want to get in the habit of saying no tiles at all. So just remember, try not to give only one tile to your optional across. And also, if an opponent stops the Charleston and that opponent is sitting across from you, no thank you as far as doing an optional, because you can do the optional once the passing stopped, you go right to the optional. All right, so this is what I'm going to do here. And now we have a 1, an 8, and a 9. And the 1 does go with the 1, 3, 5. So I might just keep that for a little bit just to see, because it is all the category of 1, 3, 5. Nonetheless, we're going to start discarding and take a look. 99 tiles right here. So after the deal, you have 99 tiles. We're going to play through the first 33. I'm going to talk about the strategies for the first 33 tiles. And to begin with, you can play through the first 33 tiles very quickly. Everybody is just beginning the game. People's hands, your opponent's hands, are not well formed, hopefully, and not set up to be able to call tiles. And even if they do call, it's better that players call early than for you to hold on to any tiles that they need and call later for Mahjong. So there's a couple of rules that will apply. One is you want to play the beginning game a little quicker. Once you get to be a better player and you get to know the card more, you'll be able to do that. The first 33 tiles, you play at a faster pace. Second thing is get out fresh tiles. Fresh tile are tiles that you don't see out there on the discard table or this board, game board here, because your opponents are not well set and could possibly not call those tiles. So they see their tiles going out that they can't call yet, and it makes it harder for them to call the tile or to make their hand. And you just want to remember that if you hold tiles that somebody else needs or that you think they need, because that's very often how a beginner thinks, you're going to have a harder time forming your hand, because your hand's you're going to start picking in jokers or picking in your tiles, and you're sitting on somebody else's tiles as your hand is getting more well formed. And then later on, you go to discard an opponent's tile, and then it could definitely be a Mahjong or a third exposure. So for sure, get out fresh tiles. The other thing is, in prioritizing your discards, is get rid of any tile that you had in your rack. Here's the rack that is not really a rack for the purposes of online gaming. This is your rack. So you're going to get out tiles that did not go out in the Charleston that you held that you were thinking you might use. So let's say the one crack never left during the Charleston. That would be a priority. Wins are a priority. Wins are very popular, especially when there are a lot of pungs in the wins. And line 3 is a very popular hand this year. So is line 1 on the left and right side. Lots of the wind hands are pretty popular this year. So just get them out early. And then after that, take a look, make sure that you get out fresh tiles. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are soap tile, or any dragons that you are not using, go out early. Flowers, you're going to hold until we know 100% that we're not using it. And that should be, we should have a good idea by the middle of the middle game, which is the middle 33 tiles. So let's get this out first.
Flower.
Now the computer names it for you, but try to get in the habit of naming it. You will need to name them when you play in person. You don't want to go from the computer to sitting around a table and you're like, wind, like that. Or name the number and be like 5, dot? And somebody says, no, it's a bam. You want to know and get comfortable and know the names of these tiles. You learn this early on, get used to it. So say it as the computer says it. All right, well, it's asking me to call. In the computer world of Mahjong, the opponent would have discarded this. West discarded a flower. It tells you right here which player. West is over here to my right. And this is like Wes in person discarding a tile. In the computer world, it has to pop up with a button with buttons to ask you if you want the tile. It has to work that way in a computer game, coding wise. So you're going to say call or ignore. And in this case, we're ignoring because I have no jokers. I haven't even picked a hand out yet. And we won't be picking a hand until we run out of discards and get in all the tiles toward any like numbers with 3s or 5s or 1, 3, 3, 5 and hone in on one hand. Right now, ignore.
Flower.
Again,
Green.
Now I did get another flower, so that's good because line 1 of any like numbers needs flowers, and there are several hands in the 1, 3, 5 category as well that needs flowers. So now I'm just going to keep discarding what's not already on the board and just continue on.
9 bam. 9 crack. Soap.
There's a soap.
6 crack.
Okay,
4
just
dot.
continue
7
on
dot.
looking and seeing.
Soap.
If I don't need it
6 bam.
and I can't call it, I just hit ignore. We got another flower. I'll put that up here. Remember, I put the flowers up here because they are at the beginning of all the hands.
8 crack. West.
I'm
8
getting
crack.
close to running out of discards.
3 dot.
And now we're at 84 tiles. I got to keep track. Okay, so a 3 dot is now gone out on the board. And as a new player, you should be alerted right now to the fact that you have 3 dots in your hand and you might need that. So you want to say, hold up, give me a minute. I got to take a look. And if we were to call this for line 1 of the any like numbers here, okay, we could call it for a pung right now, but it's early in the game and I don't want to commit to that, being that I don't have a lot of other 3s and my 5s are much stronger for any like numbers. But if I were to call it for the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 category, I could potentially call it, let's see, what could I call it for? I could call it for line 3. That requires the matching dragon, which is what? The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which 2 have gone out. So that wouldn't even make sense right now. So I honestly, this is way too early to commit to anything because I don't have jokers right now. And let's see, 3 times 5, line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 3 times 5 equals 15. I would still need a joker to call that 3 dot. So that isn't even going to happen. So we're going to say ignore. And
9 crack. 4 crack.
And this 1 could be the 15, by the way. 3 dot times the 5 bams equals 1, 5. That could be it. If I get lucky enough to get the 5, I would definitely be looking at that hand. I'd love the 1 dot, but we don't have it in our hand. So here we have 2 flowers went out early. We have 3, and there is a 4th one that has just gone out. Whether I do any like numbers with the conga flowers or that 5th hand down, which I'm really liking, 3 times 5 equals 15, they both use a conga flowers. I'm going to make a decision to call it because my 4 plus 2 out means there's only 2 left in the wall. If anybody else is using flowers, I may never get the opportunity to get another one, or I might need a joker. So I'm going to call that. So in person, you would say call, and you would take the tile off the table as you saw in one of your episode lessons. Place that call tile up on top of your rack and then bring up the other 3. The computer is going to do it for us, but it's going to ask us if we want a Kong or if this is for Mahjong. So I am going to say it's for a Kong. It is certainly not for Mahjong. Now, if you see it says exposures, we have a Kong of flowers exposed. And everybody else here can see that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I have to make a decision and discard something. So if I want to keep the 3 times 5 equals 15 and any like numbers with 5s, because I have more 5s than 3s, I'm going to go ahead and start discarding the 1 and the 3.
3 bam. 6 bam. 4 crack. 2 dot.
And again, I take a look, no 4 bams out. That means I need to get that out early. And also, remember earlier I had said to you, if there was a tile that was in your hand that you never sent out, well, the 1 bam is a tile that I either had at the beginning or got in, and I never passed that at all. So I'm going to actually get the 1 bam out before the 4 bam. Both of them are fine. I'm just going a little bit over the top with my prioritizing, knowing that. And these are things you'll know and learn and get much better at as you start feeling more comfortable with the card and what you're forming.
1 bam. 9 dot. 8 dot. Call. 7 crack.
Now we have an exposure by Wes. And I want you to see there's 74 tiles left. I have to keep reminding myself to watch. I only want to go down to 66. Wes has 8 dots up. And what does he have up with him? Jokers. What does that mean? If you pick an 8 dot in, or any of the other players pick an 8 dot in, including Wes, they can do a joker exchange. So we never want to miss a joker because they're so valuable. So keep an eye after you pick from the wall, before you quickly discard, take a quick peek around at your opponent's exposures. Okay, we're going to ignore here.
7 crack. 4 bam. Call. Red.
All right, Wes has called a 4 bam. Let me ignore this and wait until my pick comes in. We're going to look to see what he's playing. And I am going to get a joker.
4 crack. 3 crack.
Wow, actually picked 2 for bams. I wish he had 2 up there. Well, let's take a look and see what he's playing first. 4s and 8s. 4s, a pung of 4s and a Kong of 8s. 2, 4, 6, 8. More than likely, because I don't think there's a run with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, there is not with 2 suits. So if we look at 2, 4, 6, 8, take a look at line number 2. Pung, pung, Kong, Kong. Number 2 on the right side, because it's 2 suits, bams and dots. That looks like the hand that he's playing. Let's see if there's something else he can be playing. Look at line number 2. It's a pair of 2s and a pung of 4s in 1 suit. He's got that. Then a next suit with a pair of 4s and a pung of 6s, and a third suit in 8 and a Kong of 8s. He could be playing that as well. Looking down, there's nothing else he can be playing but line 1 on the right side or line 2. So we know we got to keep an eye on it, but it's still way early in the game to even worry about throwing a tile that he needs. Because again, I'm going to remind you, if you hold somebody else's tiles, then you're not going to be able to make Mahjong. So if you think that you can't make Mahjong and your hand is like so far away, which in the beginning, you got tons of tiles to pick from. You can't even know that you can't make it until the very end. You always get tiles out that you think someone needs early, early, early. All right, so I'm going to say in person, Wes, may I have your joker, please? I'm going to hand Wes, the natural talent, he's going to hand me the joker. The computer's going to do it for us. Double click on the joker.
Joker swap.
And it lets us know. And I finally got my first joker. And it's now time for me to discard. So I can go ahead and discard the 4. That still leaves me open for any like numbers, line number 1, or that 13579 line number 5 on the left side. We're looking pretty good. So even if we don't mahjong, it's coming in nicely. And we'll talk more about the fact that you're not always going to be making a mahjong. But if you play your hand well, you should feel very good about it. 1 out of 4 people have to mahjong, not all 4 at one time. All right, so let's go ahead and discard.
4 bam. 9 bam.
And we're at 68 tiles.
3 dot.
And now I have an opportunity to call the 3 dot. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to call it for that line number 5 on the right side because I can call the 5 bam, and it is taking a little bit of a chance to hope that I get the 5 crack and that somebody else is not playing them and they don't have it. But because I'm so well formed and I'm getting so close, this would make sense to do right now. If I were a lot further away, then I would maybe hold off and wait a bit. But this really is my strongest hand right now. So I'm going to go ahead and call it for a Kong. Always make sure you look at the card. It needs a Kong of 3s in, and I'm going to use the 3 dots as my first suit.
Call.
There we go. And the 3 dot joker is no longer available for exchange because the other 3 dot is already on the table. We still have 8 dots for joker exchanges. I now discard the 5 dot.
5 dot. 2 bam.
And we're going to hold up right here and end this episode. There are 66 tiles left here. We've just completed the first third of the game. I'll see you in episode 14 in just a little bit.